I would love to welcome to the studio aged care service founder and mompreneur, Tamar Krebs. How do you like being referred to? Do you like this reference of being called a mompreneur, or?
I think it's fantastic. I think it describes the fact that I'm a mom, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a CEO and a founder of a company, so it's great.
We're going to dive deep into your story, but just because we're all moms here, how many kids do you have?
I have 4 kids.
4 kids, awesome. Well, you know, today we want to talk a little bit about the service-based aged care business that you have and a little bit about how it started. And one place I'd love to start is how you grew up, because you grew up surrounded by your great-grandfather, and you were able to see what that looked like, what that family dynamic looked like. Can you go into a little bit of detail and tell us about that growing up experience and seeing how your grandfather lived with your family and what the end of his life looked like?
For sure. So I grew up with my great-grandfather. We lived in New York. We lived in the basement. My parents were students at the time. And my grandfather lived upstairs. And we had a really special relationship. And unfortunately, throughout his life, he became quite ill. But he had the most beautiful end-of-life journey surrounded by his children, his grandchildren, and his great-grandchildren. Later in life, when I became a registered nurse and started running aged care facilities, I thought everybody has beautiful end-of-life journeys. And unfortunately, I realized that that wasn't the case. And so I decided to do something very different.
What got you into the dementia side of it? Because we all go, dementia's an old age thing. It's something that you're going to get when you get older. But you were saying earlier, that's not necessarily right.
So dementia is not a normal part of aging. And aged care is sort of the part of the industry. Dementia specifically is not the exciting part. I specifically love working with people with dementia because you're learning and you're curious about them living with the disease as opposed to suffering with the disease, which is a really important distinction.
Can you tell us how your facilities are different from what we have in Australia?
So the name of the homes are called Group Homes Australia, and they have a very small amount of people, between 6 to 8 people living in a regular home in your regular suburb. They look, feel, and smell like homes. And no matter the level of dementia, people get involved in cooking, baking, shopping, gardening, everything that we do in a normal day, but it's not a lock-up institution. What we see is sort of the trend in Australia at the moment.
Well, I'm really curious if we can just take one step back for our viewers and for us as well. Can you just help us understand what dementia is?
Dementia is an umbrella term that describes a whole group of diseases. So Alzheimer's is probably the most popular disease of dementia. We know that there's a vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia. It's very important to know it's not a normal part of aging, but it is the #1 killer for women in Australia today.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, my father-in-law is actually suffering from dementia, and so my mother-in-law is the primary carer now. How is that? Like, I'm just seeing how she does it, and it requires a lot of work, a lot of care. How is that offered in Group Homes Australia? Because she's debating whether do I put him into care? Do I care for him myself?
What we find, and it's a great question, because what we find with families is they really mourn the loss of what the person can no longer do. And what we do at Group Homes Australia is really focusing on what the person can do. So obviously they can't cook a full meal, but can they crack an egg? Can they chop? Can they peel? They can't take care of the full garden.
So that's something that's happening in your facility. They're able to still participate in those activities.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So, and there's someone there to help them do the things that they can't do in that.
So we have staff called homemakers that do everything with the residents and not for the residents. So sort of a use it or lose it. If they don't use the capacity, they lose the capacity to do these things.
So how many people do you have in these group homes?
Anywhere between 6 to 8 people living in each home. Okay. So it's a household model. I have 6 people living in my home.
And they're not signposted out the front? You would drive past and not realise that it's a care facility?
You would never know. You drive past and it looks exactly like any of the neighbouring homes. When you walk in, there's a smell of baking, not your sort of smell of institutions. Yeah. And that's really important.
You know, Tamar, I know that you grew up in Israel and you are a person of faith, and I wonder if that drives any of your decisions or any of your ideas around end of life and the dignity that people should have when they're at that moment in their lives.
Absolutely. So I think my faith guides me in everything around inclusion, including people in conversations, including people in having that discussion and having choice around how you want to go through your end of life. And I'm not talking about euthanasia, because people tend to take it all the way there.
Thank you for expanding on that, because I'm sitting here going, end of life? Doesn't that mean a needle?
No, so it doesn't. It means about having, you know, we plan for birth, we plan to go to university, we plan to get married, we plan to have children. Everything is planned. But when it comes to death, we sort of assume, oh, don't talk about it.
It's a taboo topic.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's actually a topic that we should talk about. Do we want our family there? Do we want to happen at home? Should it happen in a hospital? What are the type of things that are meaningful and purposeful to us at the end? And that's different. different to each person.
So do you have these kind of conversations with your residents about what end of life might look like for them?
Many times the conversation isn't necessarily with the person themselves because they have dementia, and at that point they can't necessarily, they don't have the capacity to have that conversation, but we sit around with the children or with the partners and definitely start discussing what was meaningful for the person, how would they like to have their end of life, and really guide them through that process so that you can celebrate their end of life and really give the family what I would call an unconditional gift.
Do you find it a very tearful discussion? Because I'm just thinking about it and having to discuss it about, like, you know, say with my father-in-law, and I'm like, I want to cry just thinking about it. Like, how do you go about that kind of discussion?
Crying is a real emotion. It's not something that we have to necessarily not do. And you know, having a baby, we cry for happiness. And, you know, when we do things, there's certain normal parts and normal phases of life. And it's a real valid emotion to be sad. And, you know, it's scary for the person going through it, so why not validate that and open the discussion and say, no, I'm really uncomfortable having this conversation. I'm going to miss you, but I want to make sure that you have dignity. And if that's the goal, let's all get on board and have that discussion.
I think it's great as well because you're taking away the fear of end of life, and I think as humans we just have this natural fear about the end of our lives, and it seems as though you're bringing dignity, you're bringing respect,
And celebrating that person.
the end of. Yeah.
Absolutely, and especially for somebody living with dementia, and I always say living, not suffering with dementia, it's about teaching them and the family how to live through that disease. And yes, it is a terminal disease and it's a sad disease, but it's about the life and it's about celebrating and helping someone flourish as their world diminishes. How do we do that?
There's one story in particular I think that would be great for us to tell our viewers as we're ending the show about this couple who the wife was able to be with her husband in those final moments of his life. Can you share that with us quickly?
Sure. So the couple came to us, and he was dying, and they had been married for 67 years. And every aged care facility that they went to wanted to separate them because they had different care needs. And because at Group Homes Australia, we don't define people by their care needs, we wanted to celebrate that they were going through their end-of-life journey. And the morning that he passed, you know, they were lying on the bed together, and she was holding him, and she put her head on his chest, and she said, "Take me with you."
I love this story, and I'm so happy that you're able to be here with us, and you've given us something different to think about and a different perspective to think around end of life. So now, as we're thinking about this, I want to thank you so much for joining us here today at the table. It's always great to have your company, and don't forget that you can share our video with your friends on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And of course, we love hearing what you have to say, so get to commenting because there's always room for you here at the table. Ladies, I want to thank you so much for being here with us today, for sharing your opinions. We really missed Rachel Humphreys. And Tamar, I really want to thank you so much for being here as well. You've definitely shifted my thinking and had me think about some different things as it comes to end of life. So thank you so much for being here with us today, and we welcome you to join us next time here with us at the table.